Sports is brought to you by Terrebonne General Health System's Community Sports Institute in conjunction with Barker Honda.
All right, welcome back. A sports segment, of course, and we appreciate Stan Gravois being with us. And to put a title on the Stan would be very difficult. A friend of HTV done so much for sports here in the area, so much for high school, so much for a lot of things. But Stan is the director of the Healthy Lifestyle Center at Terrebonne General Health System. Stan, good to see you again.
Good to be back.
Yeah, no doubt. Of course, I see you quite a bit on the shows and all that, but I specifically wanted to talk about the 200-year process of sports in Terrebonne Parish. And I know when you took this on, it was going to be right, but 200 years, what a massive undertaking.
I wish I would have had that frame of mind when we started this morning, because I got to tell you. So everything with this, the genesis of all of this started before Hurricane Ida, and accepted the role of helping with this, but didn't know sort of what I was getting myself into. It's certainly something of interest to me, but boy, it's deep. I mean, when you go start reading some of the things, and what's also interesting is some of the things that were our earliest sports in Terrebonne Parish, some of the traits still hold true today. And what I mean by that is you know, the first documented ball game that we ever had in our area, I'm not talking about fishing rodeos, anything like that. I'm talking about a baseball game in 1888. That was, you know, the big problem was this rain came in the sixth inning and they didn't know what to do with all the money they had collected before for betting. You know, how do you give the money back? How do you call it a ball game after six innings? So, you know, again, some of those things, we're in a day and age where you have, you know, FanDuel and DraftKings. Well, there was betting on ball games way back when too. So a lot of things that we see now, we saw then, and a lot of things that surprised me along the way about our high schools and our high school sports.
Let me ask you, because we're going to show this, by the way, on Facebook and YouTube. It's been out, but we're going to, after this presentation on Facebook and YouTube, we're going to show the entire program so you can watch it. But just trying to give you a little history, like Stan says, a genesis of how it came together. Did anything surprise you? You've been involved in sports. I've been involved in sports, but every time you come up or you make a presentation, especially for the Hall of Fame, I'm going, I never knew that person existed. There are so many great athletic-minded people in this area. Does it baffle you sometimes at how much there is?
Yes, yes, and because even what's behind, you know, you start pulling on the strings, you know, and as you're pulling and you're digging down in the layers, you find out things about people that you didn't realize. You know, we hear of people like, obviously, Vince Lombardi, but we didn't know that Vince Lombardi loved the Earl Grow, who was from Shreveport, Louisiana, right? And wanted that guy. That guy's tough. He's my kind of guy. He wanted that guy, you know. And then you have a Robert Brunet, who's from down here, a terrific athlete, and he plays for Vince Lombardi, and he's like, I'm not crazy about the way Vince Lombardi coaches. So you see all different sides of it. Yeah, there were tons of things with this and with the Hall of Fame where I'm learning just every step of the way. One thing that surprised me, I thought when I was going to start reading, and obviously, you know, our history in Terrebonne Parish starts in 1822. I thought it was going to be about outdoor sports. I thought it was going to be about big fishing rodeos back then. It wasn't. There was no organized, sanctioned fishing rodeos till like 1920-something in our area. And obviously, we know we have the big Grand Isle Tarpon Rodeo outside of Terrebonne Parish, but that's a big international tournament that really didn't start until, you know, 1920s. So that being said, we didn't have a lot of organized sports. It was that baseball game between a team from Thibodaux and a team from Houma in 1888. The Frassons, that was the name of one team, and the Wrights. Now, why those names originated that way, I don't know. The Frassons were from Houma. The Wrights were from Thibodaux. They got together and played. 3 newspapers at the time covered the game, and that's sort of where it all started. So even that really surprised me. And then, of course, you know, Terrebonne High becoming a school that had Louisiana High School Athletic Association sports really started to where you can, there's a lot of sports that came about probably about 1908.
And with about a couple of minutes left in the first segment, when we go to the coffee shop and I'm sitting with Paul Hopgood, who used to coach at Terrebonne High, had a great track team. but South Terrebonne had a great track team. And we were talking one day, and I was thinking back, and I'm going, before the days of social media and all these games where the kids play now, people were outside, they were running, they were competing. The track teams and the athletes we had in this area were second to none. I remember Ricky Britt coming up to me one day and said, Mark, we never met, but I hear you talk about me all the time on HTV. I said, you're Ricky Britt? So these names are imprinted in our brain because they were so good.
The potential of some of the kids we have in our parish today that probably won't do the things because of what you mentioned. Mm-hmm. Technology sort of gets in the way. We don't understand that's kind of mind-boggling, because I do think we still have that talent. I don't think it's being exposed, but yeah, that's what I grew up on, the Ricky Britts and the Herman Verdans and the, Warren Shanklins and those guys. And you mentioned Coach Hopgood. It's fun just to sit and talk with him. He's actually not originally from here. He's from West Monroe.
Right.
And he comes in and talks about there were athletes just everywhere you looked. And that was a good range from the 50s, about 1950 all the way through to about 1985. Mm-hmm. But I think we still got them. I think we just need to expose them some kind of way.
Yeah, their priorities are a little different. We understand exactly it's a different thing. But as we talk about this, I remember in our era, just growing up, and I remember going to Trap Chevrolet many times and talking with Harold Haydell, and him just sharing stories about his ascension into the major leagues. And as a kid, we'd go out in the yard, and either if it was baseball season, we'd play like we're Harold Haydell. If it was football season, we'd play like we're Frank Lewis. It was, just different things that were so important to us. Once again, we didn't have iPhones or beepers or anything. We had to go out there and have our imagination and play the game.
Sure.
Who's the greatest, in all this research, boy, I'm going to really put you on the spot. Who's the greatest athlete in your opinion?
The greatest athlete, that's a tough one because you don't want to leave anybody out, but I think you just mentioned him, and that would be Frank Lewis. Frank Lewis did not play high school football till his senior year, and he was coached. And he was coached by a guy who was kind of my mentor, and I want to give him a shout out, and that's Raymond Taylor, who unfortunately left us in this last year. He passed away. But Coach Taylor was at Southdown High School, and he kind of coaxed Frank Lewis into play in that senior year, and good God, it took off from there. He goes to Grambling, sets the world on fire at Grambling. Then he gets drafted in the first round by Pittsburgh. And if you want to meet somebody who is just the epitome of humbleness, he's a guy who, I said to him when we actually talked to him for his induction into the Hall of Fame, and I said, so today, man, it's like all the ritz and glamour of the signing day or the draft day, right? They're in the hall in Las Vegas or in New York. What was it when you signed? He said, I was in Deweyville by the tunnel, and I was outside, and my mom said, hey, telephone, and I went to answer, and I was like, who are you? Pittsburgh Steelers? Yeah, I guess I'll play. And it was the first round.
Was it Chuck Noll?
No, at that time it was, boy, and pardon me for getting who it was. He's the owner of the team.
Oh, okay.
And always has been around there. I was about to say Lamar Hunt, but it's not Lamar Hunt. But anyway, the Steelers in that tradition, he gets a call, and he graciously accepts and goes out there. And to this day, our friend Mike Detillier will tell you, if you're ever around Terry Bradshaw, yell out Frank Lewis's name, and Terry Bradshaw will stop everything.
Can I tell you a quick story on that? We're in Chicago when the Saints were playing Chicago. Bradshaw and all the entourage was on night before the game. Had them roped off. Of course, they playing around with the crowd. Troy Aikman was there, everybody. And, some beautiful girls in the front were going, Terry, can I take a picture with you? And he was going, oh, if I take one with you, I got to take one with her. And he's playing it off pretty good. So I was with one of my friends. I said, I'm going to get a picture with him. He said, he just turned down all these beautiful women. I said, watch. I'll walk up to the rope. I said, Terry, I need a picture with you. He goes, if I take one with you, he went through the thing. I said, yeah, but they don't know Frank Lewis. I do. He said, how you know Frank Lewis? I said, I'm from Houma, Louisiana. He said, let him through. And I went up there and I took a picture. If I'm not mistaken, I think his grandmother had some roots in Houma too.
Is that right?
I think she might have stayed here for a little bit, Terry Bradshaw.
Huh.
So there was a connection, but he adored Frank Lewis.
He's just a guy that everybody likes. Again, very humble. They tell me if you give him basketball, he could go out there and tear it up. They tell me if you put him on a track, he's as fast as just about everybody there, but he probably could do the jumps too. If you let him go play baseball, he says, I loved softball when I was a kid and all of this. He could do everything. There's a lot of really good athletes. You know, Earl Groh is a name a lot of people don't know a lot about. Terrific athlete at LSU. Look up Earl Groh if you don't know who that is. He's from Shreveport, Louisiana. His burial plot is right there at St. Bridget Church, the Catholic Church in Shreveport, and he was terrific. He was a first-round draft choice along the way. Then there's younger guys who were so good. Even guys from our generation, that Jesse Miles was a terrific athlete. Kind of lost his way, but Jesse was a terrific athlete.
Clarence Verdun.
Clarence Verdun was an all-pro. And then as of late, I don't know if I've ever seen a better high school football player than Elijah McGuire when he was here in town at Vanderbilt Catholic. A kid named Philip Livis over at South Terrebonne, who is one of the top 50 players to ever play at Louisiana Tech. That's a lot. And, a guy that obviously well, you grew up with him, but I've gotten to know certainly, and Harry was a terrific baseball player.
Absolutely.
Wally Whitehurst. Just names that we don't – I think I took on this role more to make sure we don't forget these people. That this documentary, which is about an hour and 15 minutes long, that it basically sort of procures their place in history. And we made sure all of the high schools get a copy so that those kids will never forget.
I used to hit infield to Harry before he go back to, I think he was with St. Louis and AAA at the time, and I go hit him baseballs at Vanderbilt. One took a bad hop and it cut his lip and he got pretty good stitches. And when we brought him home, his mama was Annie Manning. She was a great lady, but she was panicking because she thought his next career would be modeling.
Is that right? Wow. Just a real quick, I do have to say this about Harry. You guys were a couple of years old. I was at South Terrebonne, and I'm in left field, and I'm playing with all seniors. Man, Perry Russo, Billy Wurslow, Steve Walcott, Chris Whitney, all of these guys who were really good. And we're playing you guys from Vanderbilt over there, and Harry hit a ball, and I'm in left field. And I had my, the old getting in your stance in left field, and I never moved, and the ball went over my head, and I never moved. The ball came down by the goalposts out there and stuff.
I saw him took Paul Fitch deep one day, too. But
ooh, if you hit one off of Paul Fitch. You see, those names are great to remember.
Yeah, it is.
I hope we can't ever
Paul
forget
Fitch threw one of them patented fastballs, and if you ever hit, anybody knows who batted against Paul Fitch, they whistled by pretty good.
Yeah, I got hit by Paul Fitch one time, and I still got the mark.
I would assume during this process, I know about girls' sports because my career started filming Vanderbilt softball. Coach Albert took what I thought at the time was just a bunch of good-looking, docile girls and made them into competitors and started a dynasty. And along the way, I found out girls really compete.
Do they compete?
They compete, and of course Chip Didier and volleyball, and I still to this day love to watch volleyball. Girls volleyball is one of the most competitive sports ever. You had to see that evolve through this.
Absolutely. And listen, it does start with Vanderbilt softball. I mean, when you think of the blue blood of softball in the state of Louisiana, it's Vanderbilt Catholic. But I think what people might not realize is, and they might go, well, that just started in 1980 or 1975 or whatever it may be. You're wrong. Because there were girls' basketball teams at Terrebonne High in 1908.
Really?
1908, and we have pictures of it. If you see this documentary, by the way, it's called Les Sports de Terrebonne, the sports of Terrebonne. So we wanted to put that little French, moniker on it. You'll see early in the documentary how there were some girls' basketball teams at Terrebonne that were pretty good. But then in like the early 30s, there was one team at Terrebonne that was terrific, made it to the state championship but lost. So there were a lot of girls' sports out there, but when you're talking about dynasties, obviously you talk about Vanderbilt related to softball. And Chip Didier, when you think of volleyball at two schools, he goes to a state championship at South Terrebonne, takes a sort of hiatus from that, tries his hand at Nicholls State, does the same thing at H.L. Bourgeois, goes to Terrebonne, he's successful there. So, yeah, he's certainly got the Midas touch.
Hey, Coach Albert did the Vanderbilt H.L. Bourgeois thing.
Yes. It's something you understand. It's something that might be a little different in your temperament, how you're dealing with them, but you know how to get the best out of them. And we certainly have had really, really good girl sports. Now, I do think of this, you know, in my mind is spinning. I'm going, oh, Lord, is Martin going to ask me the best female athlete I've ever seen?
I was about to.
Well, too bad, because there's too many of them. Because you get into that pitching realm, and you have to think Michelle Broussard, and you have to think Margaret.
Yeah.
know, you got to think people like, I mean, Margaret could go and play volleyball and just
She was a
spike it in
four-sport
your
letterman.
face.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
and this is at McNeese State where
Yeah.
she's a,
Yeah.
you know, a letterman. So,
But Michelle, I nicknamed her Fireball early on because she was just throwing. Now, it all caught up to her when everybody developed, but in those days,
yeah.
she was untouchable.
And that's what it was. It was those days. So you have
88-0 as a pitcher.
absolutely, the Duesenberries, you know, Joni
Yeah,
and Jerry
yeah.
over at
Yeah,
H.L.
good point,
Bourgeois
yeah.
were terrific. Pitchers and just players. I mean, Joni won a state championship basically by herself one year where she hit the home run to win it and she pitched the entire game. So a lot of really good girls sports in our area. It was fun. It was fun reading about this and going, oh, I never knew that. To know from 1950 on the nose to about 1962, the athletes that came out of our parish that played at LSU, Billy Junkie, Merle Shakesnyder was a Chinese bandit.
Yeah.
Alvin Oquan was the captain of the 1957 LSU team.
Just did a one-on-one with him.
Billy Cannon loved the guy, you know. You go right down the line and you see in all of these people, I'm sorry, I mentioned it just a little while ago where Earl Grove was part of that too. So to think that we haven't done a real good job of sort of documenting that, I'm glad that we had this opportunity. And it's on, you know, it's on paper now. We can see that it really happened.
And you know the good thing about this, Stan, and also I was telling somebody the other day, I have 40 years of archive tapes. And Stan's a big part of those archive tapes, have interviews from way back, but in Houma or Thibodeau, we've been able to put this together because New Orleans didn't pay us a lot of attention. So when we think about what we've accumulated here locally, all those people and what y'all do with the Hall of Fame Foundation would never get recognized, and there's a special place for them. And sometimes when y'all announcing these people, there's people in the audience going, I never knew that. I never knew that.
Listen, you're part of that
Yeah.
Hall of Fame, and when you're sitting there just as I am, and they get up and they speak, and you have a Tommy Hodson who breaks down saying, this is so special to me because it's home. It's where I started from. Or Robert Brunet, who was right there from LaRose, who played for the Redskins for all of those years. Excuse me, the Commanders, whatever you call them now. And he's talking and he's saying, this is like one of the highlights of my life. You're going, this means something. Plus, again, we're preserving history, and that's what we
And
want
when
to
Tommy
do.
Hodson was up there doing it and Bob Hebert sitting in the audience, you get it because they Central Lafourche and South Lafourche had the wars together. But
Clarence is, you know, we show in Clarence, and I grew up with Clarence, so I've always known Clarence Verdun. Clarence is catching a pass in the USFL for the Houston Gamblers, and in the background you see Hebert with his helmet, holding his helmet, watching. You know, he's on obviously on offense, so he's watching this play. And when we saw that footage, we thought, how can we show that this is Bobby Hebert from LaRose watching a kid from Grand Caillou, you know, in a professional ball game.
Well, Stan, thank you for what you do. Once again, we're going to run this after this, and I appreciate what you do, and I look forward on another program where, just real quick, we're going to announce the Hall of Famers.
Hall of Fame, January. We'll let everybody know who's being inducted in 2023.
All right. Thanks, Stan. We appreciate
Thanks,
the work.
Martin.
All right, there you have it. Stan Gravois did a great job of helping us preserve some of the history in sports here in Terrebonne Parish. And if you don't think it's important, ask everyone who's played. They still love to go back in memory lane. And we'll see you again soon on another sports program right here on HTV.
With the rich abundance of fertile, fresh, and salt water, one might think that the rich history of sports in Terrebonne Parish has its roots planted in recreational outdoor activities related to game fishing or competitive competition, but such is not the case. Although fishing for commerce was certainly an asset to the early settlers in the parish, and there is no doubt that our early settlers in the Bayou region had friendly wagers on who can catch the biggest or who can catch the most, anglers had to wait until well into the 20th century for sanctioned rodeos and similar events that allowed competition in the event. As a matter of fact, there is no documented activity of competitive sports in Terrebonne Parish for the first 65 years of its existence. And ironically, the sport that is the first to be documented as being played competitively in the Houma area didn't happen until the latter end of the 1800s, and that sport was baseball. Yes, the earliest records of documented competitive sports in our great parish was the Wright Frazee baseball game that was played in May of 1877. The game was played in Houma, although no specific date can be confirmed, and featured teams made up of individuals from the Thibodaux area who came down to Bayou to play the home-standing team from Houma. The Frazee Nine represented the Houma area, and the Wright boys represented the Thibodaux region. There were actually 3 newspapers there to cover the event: the Thibodaux Sentinel, the Terrebonne Times, and the Terrebonne Advocate. And although all 3 of the newspapers could not agree on the final score of the game, they did all agree that the game was halted in the 7th inning due to a tremendous rainstorm. The Sentinel and the Times both had the team from Thibodaux on top at the time of the weather stoppage, with the Times adding that a careful reading of the rules will clearly show that the Thibodaux club forfeited the game by refusing to continue to play. But the Sentinel had the right 9 with a 2-point advantage, whereas the Times stated it was a 1-point advantage. The Advocate had the game as a draw, with the hopes that the 2 teams could meet at a later date to continue the adventure, although there is no evidence that the game was ever officially completed. And so it begins, competition on the Bayou. Our high schools became the cornerstone to athletic competition in Terrebonne Parish in the early and mid-20th century. Although Our Lady of the Sacred Heart, later to become St. Francis de Sales High School and then Vanderbilt Catholic, was our first secondary school in the parish, opening its doors in 1870, the school did not field athletic teams until the arrival of Coach Lucas Buddy Marcello in 1951. It was Terrebonne High School, our second oldest secondary school, which had a rich beginning to athletics. Sports really hit its stride in Terrebonne Parish with the official start of sports programs at Terrebonne High in 1908. Multiple athletic activities were offered to the students of the only high school fielding competitive teams in the parish, thus giving the opportunity for competition in football, basketball, and track and field for the boys, and only the sport of basketball for the girls. Ironically, although baseball was the first competitive sport to be played in the parish, as mentioned with the Wright Frazee game back in 1887, our high schools did not field the sport of baseball until 1951. In another note of irony, Buddy Marcello was a star athlete at Terrebonne High in the early 40s, and he later went on to start the baseball and all other athletic programs at St. Francis de Sales High School in 1950. The early days of athletics at Terrebonne High certainly didn't go off without a hitch. The infant teams struggled with wins and drawing numbers for each of the given sports, especially football. Track and field was the first of the sports that garnered success, as in 1909, the then called Terrebonne Bulldogs competed in the loosely organized Bayou Conference with teams from Donaldsonville, Thibodaux, Napoleonville, and Belrose. The Bulldogs won the conference title behind the brother duo of Charles and Claiborne Duval. Charles led the team in field events and Claiborne in the sprints. It was in 1914 that the Bulldogs hit their stride in football. The squad that year finished with a 3-win, 1-loss, 1-tie season. The only loss that year was a 6-2 decision to Baton Rouge High School. The boys from Terrebonne averaged about 135 pounds, with the beefed-up players playing in at 160 pounds. From its earliest days, Terrebonne was always in the highest classification in the state of Louisiana's high school athletic organizations. Thus, the competition was always measured at the highest level, with other schools being from more metropolitan areas. The first All-Stater from the Houma School was Louis Mohana in the mid-20s, as the school went on to have a tradition of strong football. Terrebonne transformed the mascot from the Bulldogs to the Tigers in the third decade of the century, as the school started to form rivalries with schools from the Baton Rouge area, specifically Estruma High School and the New Orleans area. The 1939 girls basketball team, under the direction of Mrs. Johnny Stell, was led by captains Kathleen Blanchard and Kate Bro. To date, this team established the most success of any Lady Tigers squad, only losing one game, 25-21, to the Thibodeau High Tigers in the regular season. Unfortunately, the Lady Tigers fell to LaGrange High School one game short of a state championship. The Tigers went on to field football teams that were always near the top of the rankings in the state, especially the teams in the 40s and 50s under the guidance of head coaches Tom B. Smith and William Buck Sieber, but could never overcome the state power Estruma team, who the Terrebonne team played on a yearly basis in their own district.
In those days, you could play 10 semesters. Today, you could only play 8. When the next school year started, which was 42, they gave me 3 subjects. And then that was my last year. So I finished school in 42. No, 43. 42 was the football season. 43 was when school was out. As soon as I graduated, I made some plans with some of my friends, George A. Baird, who was the assessor for years, a couple of other guys. We're going to New Orleans and we're going in. I said, look, fellas, they can't draft me yet. I'm not old enough. I can go where I want to go. So sure enough, I heard about the CBs. I said, I think I'm going to go into CBs.
But Coach Smith, you can't, the players loved him, man. He never put a player on the field that wasn't the ball player to be there. He no favorites.
Coach Tom Smith was a football coach, basketball coach, and a track coach. We had some track teams, terrific track athletes. We had Ward Bond and Ward Trahan and Billy Yankee and Dale Lee Rett. Now, in my senior year, they had the AAU track meet over there. And they had colleges from every place. I mean, Southeastern, Southwestern, Tulane, LSU, and old Tad Gormley, old Mr. Tad Gormley. He worked the daylights out of us because we were on a football team. We had to keep the track. It was cinder track. We pulled that great big old water tank all around that track, 440 yards. And that was, you talk about a track meet.
It wasn't until 1952 that Terrebonne High won its first sanctioned high school state championship, and that was in the sport of boys track and field. Sieber coached the Tiger Tracksters to 46 points to edge out Byrd High School out of Shreveport for the title. Tommy Strait was the Tiger who contributed most. He was a double winner in the 120-yard high hurdles and the hop, step, and jump. The Tigers also had stellar track and field seasons from 1968 to 1972, led by the likes of sprinter Marty Bouquet, jumper Warren Shanklin, and field thrower Danny Martin. But the Homa team could never overtake the dynasty of Opelousas High School for the title during those years. In 1981, the Louisiana High School Athletic Association made a deal with Gatorade and the group that ran the Louisiana Superdome. They started hosting all high school football championship games in the Louisiana Superdome. 2 years later, the Terrebonne football team, under the guidance of head coach Kelly Pugh, had its most success to date, playing in the Dome in the highest classification at the time, the Class 4A championship. But unfortunately, the Tigers came up short against a dominating Neville team from the northern part of the state. Leading the Tigers on that team was All-State running back Tyrone Walls and All-State defensive tackle Johnny Carter. There was certainly individual success at the school, with many of its student athletes moving on to have stellar collegiate and, in some cases, professional careers. Examples are 1958 graduate Earl Groh, the most decorated athlete in school history. He went on to become a dominant running back for LSU, later being drafted in the first round of the 1962 NFL draft by Vince Lombardi and the Green Bay Packers. Groh went on to rush for over 3,100 yards in the league. And then there is track and field athlete Dalton LeBlanc. LeBlanc was a 1962 graduate of Terrebonne who won an astounding 6 individual state titles as a sprinter and a hurdler. He still holds the 180-yard hurdle record for the state. He set that in 1962. He went on to run track at Northeast Louisiana University, now UL Monroe, where he was an All-American and became an alternate member of the 1968 U.S. Olympic team. He was such a good athlete, he played 1 season of football at NLU in the middle of his track and field duties, and he led the team in receptions, thus being drafted by the San Francisco 49ers in the 14th round of the 1967 NFL Draft. 1978 graduate Gregory Harding was an All-State defensive back in football. He went on to have a short stint with the New Orleans Saints after a productive collegiate campaign at Nicholls State University. And there was baseball hurler Wally Whitehurst. He was a 1983 Tiger graduate. After being named an All-State pitcher at Terrebonne in his senior year in 1983, Whitehurst went on to lead UNO to the first NCAA College World Series for a team from Louisiana. As an amateur, he also played for the USA bronze medal team before being drafted in 1985 by the Oakland A's. He later was traded to the New York Mets, where he had his most successful pitching seasons in his 7-year Major League Baseball career.
Playing at Terrebonne was a lot of fun. We had enough good players that he kind of just so-called rolled out the balls, let us go out and play.
And there is a present Terrebonne alum vying for a roster spot in the big leagues. Justin Williams, a 2013 graduate of Terrebonne, was drafted in the 2nd round of the 2013 Major League Baseball draft. His first appearance in the big leagues was with Tampa Bay in 2018. He was called up for a few games in a reserve role. His most extensive playing time came with St. Louis in 2021, where he had 51 at-bats for the Cardinals. He is now with the Philadelphia Phillies organization in their minor league system. Terrebonne High School certainly did set the pace for athletic success in our parish. Our parish's 2 Catholic high schools in 1950 were the next 2 schools to introduce competitive athletes to its students. But the 2 schools took different roads related to team leagues and structure. St. Francis de Sales High School began competition as Louisiana High School Athletic Association's member, competing in the sports of boys football, basketball, and baseball. St. Lucie Catholic High School was located in the Deweyville neighborhood and was the host school of African American Catholics in the Houma area. They competed in the Catholic School Athletic League, which was smaller in stature and did not compete for state titles. Although St. Lucie competed at a lower level than both Terrebonne High and St. Francis, the school did have very successful boys and girls basketball.
We go to the games and watch the girls, you know. St. Lucie had good girls basketball team, terrific girls basketball.
They also had successful baseball and volleyball programs, winning multiple CSAL League titles over the next 20 years. As a matter of fact, St. Lucie is the first school to play volleyball in our parish. Establishing its athletic programs in the early 50s with the hiring of Buddy Marcello, St. Francis de Sales High School achieved success at the state level immediately.
Bishop Shakespeare was the priest in charge over there. He said, Ray, you know that little school, St. Francis, they need something to get some kids in school. He said, we need some athletics programs. He said, you know, I'm going to be transferred to Houma. He said, look for me a coach. Ray said, don't look too far, because I was ready to graduate. Sure enough, I started it in 1950. And we had a little practice field next to the nuns' living room, like parlor or whatever. And Sister Lua could see out the window. She called me in one day. She says, buddy, I don't like what's going on out there. She didn't like the idea of the quarterback putting his hand on the quarterback's butt, on the center's butt. I said, sister, they do that at Notre Dame.
Again, St. Francis was initially known as Our Lady of the Sacred Heart Academy from 1870 to 1879. The name was then changed to St. Francis de Sales High School, and that name stayed with the school for almost 100 years, when in 1965, the name was changed to Houma Central Catholic High School, which only lasted 1 year. In 1967, the school became known as Vanderbilt Catholic High School and holds that title today. Under the guidance of Marcello, the baseball program quickly established a dynasty on the Class B level, as the Terriers won 8 titles in a span of 9 years, starting in 1953. The school won 8 baseball championships as St. Francis, one in 1965 as Houma Central Catholic, and two, 1971 and 2022 as Vanderbilt Catholic.
I could see this team gelling and coming together, and I basically ended up with a senior infield. And the seniors we had, I think, displayed just great leadership. They took control. We had to make some changes position-wise. During the year, I lost a center fielder due to grades, and we had to make some changes, and the guys just really embraced it. I felt like just very steady. We were good at putting the ball in play and making things happen.
In baseball, names like Harold Haydell, Johnny Breaux, Dickie Haydell, Eddie Polero, Gary LeBlanc, David Falk, Mitch Thompson, Harry McCullough, Kenny Hollaback, and so many other All-Staters dotted the rosters over the years. And although baseball was successful immediately, so many programs at the school went on to be successful soon after. After an appearance in the Class A state title games in 1957 and 58 against Tallulah High School, where the Terriers were throttled by a combined score of 51-7, the 1959 program at St. Francis became the first to win a football state championship as they garnered the Class A title with a 6-0 win over Delhi on a rainy November night in North Louisiana.
And we went back and forth on that damn wet field all night long until we threw a long pass to SP, set up a touchdown. Then we made the extra point. They scored a little later. They had a great running back that went to LSU. Boy, he broke up the middle and went about 60 yards, and they didn't make the extra point. We went 7-6.
In 1977, the Terrier football team had a very successful season, battling to a state championship appearance in Class 3A action. But they were defeated in Houma by a very talented Houghton team, 31-0. St. Francis basketball achieved moderate success as Dickie Haydell became the first All-Stater from the school, scoring 524 points in his senior 1961 season. And the Olympic sports had early success, with the golf and tennis programs being very competitive throughout the late 50s and 60s. But the most successful of all programs at Vanderbilt Catholic had to be the softball program. To date, the Lady Terriers hold the state of Louisiana record for most state championships with 14 and most appearances in a state championship game with 20. This is due in large part to National Softball Hall of Fame coach Gerald Albert. He brought the program to its level of excellence, winning 6 consecutive championships from 1980 to 1985.
Nobody wanted to coach it. And so I had to make a decision either to coach it myself or we would have to drop the program. And like I tell a lot of people, that's probably one of the most important decisions I ever made in my life, was to go ahead and take it over myself because of the program that Vanderbilt's softball program is developed into.
A large part of that early success was national record-setting pitcher Michel Broussard, who won an astounding 112 straight games between 1980 and 1983. Vanderbilt softball great and 4-time state champion as a player, Margaret Haydell Johnson, went on to win additional titles with the Lady Terriers as head coach beginning in 1988, making the school one of the blue bloods of softball in the state of Louisiana. Both the softball field and the park on the campus of Vanderbilt Catholic are named in honor of these two greats. Over the years, the Olympic programs at Vanderbilt have gone on to win over 100 state titles. Those with multiple state titles to their credit are the boys tennis program with 9 titles, the girls swimming program, and the boys soccer program, both with 8 titles. Boys swimming and golf have 7 titles apiece. Girls tennis and the cheer squad at VCHS lay claim to 6 titles each. Girls cross country has 4 titles, with girls soccer having 3. And finally, volleyball, girls and boys bowling, and girls track and field all have 2 titles to date. As with Terrebonne High, there were individuals on the athletic programs at St. Francis and Vanderbilt who went on to achieve at the highest level. Among those was Major League Baseball pitcher Harold Haydell. Haydell was an all-state pitcher for the Terriers from 1960 to 1962. He was drafted by the Houston Colt 45s in 1962 and made his first appearance in Major League Baseball for the Minnesota Twins in 1970. Another star on the baseball diamond for the Terriers was 1978 graduate Harry McCullough. McCullough was an all-stater who later was drafted by the Atlanta Braves in the 3rd round of the 1980 June amateur draft and again in the first round of the 1981 January secondary phase draft. In football, Carl Morgan was a 1979 graduate who was an important part of that 1977 run at a state championship for the Terriers. Morgan went on to UCLA after high school, where he was an all Pac-10 defensive lineman, and he later played in the NFL with both the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Houston Oilers. And the Terriers have an alum still playing in the National Football League. Elijah McGuire, a 2013 graduate, was drafted in the 5th round of the 2017 NFL Draft by the New York Jets. He presently is a member of the Kansas City Chiefs, where he won a Super Bowl ring in 2020 in Super Bowl 54. Established in 1953, Southdown High School served the Terrebonne Parish African American population before integration. A member of the public school system, Southdown was a sanctioned Louisiana interscholastic and literary organization school. Throughout the 60s, Southdown had very competitive programs, but it was baseball that garnered the school its only state championship. Behind the pitching of James Johnson and the all-around play of Elroy Clay and James Stewart, the Eagles defeated L.B. Landry High School out of New Orleans in a thriller in the 1969 LILO state championship game that was played on the campus of Southdown High School, presently located at the corner of Tunnel Boulevard and St. Charles Street in Houma. Although down most of the contest, Stewart hit a 3-run homer to pull the Eagles even in the late innings, and Clay scored on a balk in the bottom of the 6th inning, with the run proving to be the difference in a 5-4 victory. Although falling short of winning an LILO state championship in both football and basketball, Southdown teams had local success as they did win district titles in multiple years in the 1960s. The football team thought to be the strongest for the Eagles was the 1966 squad under the leadership of head coach Raymond Taylor. The Eagles sported outstanding athletes such as Elwood Williams, Alan Nixon, Gerald Price, Tyrone Smith, Donald Stovall, so many others. But there may not be a better athlete to come out of Southdown or the entire parish of Terrebonne than 1967 Eagle graduate Frank Lewis. After gaining little college All-America honors on the football field for legend Eddie Robinson and Grambling State University, Lewis was drafted in the first round of the 1971 NFL Draft by the Pittsburgh Steelers, where he went on to earn Super Bowl IX and Super Bowl X rings. After being traded to the Buffalo Bills in 1978, he became a Pro Bowler as a part of the Bills in 1981.
Guys get out there and play competitive. Everybody want to beat you. You know, everybody want to win. So it's not like it's a friendship game. You know, everybody's out for blood, trying to do the best they can. And as the years pass, they just develop your talent.
The third of the parish's Catholic schools was opened by the Diocese of New Orleans in the community of Chauvin in 1958. The Black Knights of St. Joseph Benedictine began LHSAA play soon after opening its doors in 1958. The school only entertained athletic programs for about 12 years before closing its doors in 1972. The school is widely known for coaching excellence, as many of our state's leading coaches got their start at the Class B school. Among them was Sonny Jackson, who led the Black Knights to several district championships before moving up the ranks to later become the head coach of NCAA schools Nicholls State University and McNeese State University. St. Joe's basketball program was led by Gray Folse, who later enjoyed a successful stint at Delgado Community College in New Orleans. Other high school legendary coaches got their start at the little school in the Bayou, including Ralph Perry, who later won multiple football state championships at South Lafourche High School, and George Vizier, who became a coaching staple at Vermilion Catholic in Abbeville. The first All-Stater from the Chauvin School was football offensive lineman Glenn Crochet in the early 60s. The most decorated athletes to come out of the school were 1964 graduate Dwight Savam, who'd starred in football at USL after his time in Chauvin and later was on the New Orleans Saints roster as a free agent when the NFL franchise was initiated. And 1965 graduate Larry Zerang, who was 6'7", state Class B most valuable basketball star. Zerang later went on to excel at McNeese State University on the hardwood. In 1961, Buddy Marcella took on the task of starting yet another athletic program for one of our parish schools, and this time it was for upstart South Terrebonne. The public high school is located in Berg and serves the Bayou regions of Montague, Chauvin, Berg, and East Houma. The school population was substantially larger than that of St. Francis, and the area was fertile with athletic talent.
These kids down that bayou were tough kids, you know, and it's going to take a little while for me to get them going. And especially in baseball, because they didn't play a lot of baseball. The town kids were playing all the time in some kind of program, you know. But the Gano boys came with me, Bruce and Brian, and they helped us get started in football.
We had quite a few very good athletes that may have never played at Terrebonne. And I think part of this situation was transportation. How do you do all of that and still be able to get a ride home in the evening when you live down Grand Caillou, Little Caillou, Montague? So that was always a problem. And when we, for instance, when we started at South Terrebonne, our August workouts, the coaches kept us there all day for two-a-day workouts, because many of these young guys did not have transportation. And parents couldn't take them back and forth. Back then, most households, you had one vehicle.
Participating in the largest classification in the LHSAA, Gators captured their first state championship in the sport of track and field in 1973. That team was led by sprinter Melvin Johnson, who held many national high school records in his tenure at the school. Johnson and his relay partners Ricky Britt, Robert Lagarde, and Herman Verdun also held the national record for the 4x100 relay as the fastest team in the United States that year. South Terrebonne was the first public school in Terrebonne Parish to win a state football title. Under the leadership of one of Marcello's players in the 70s, Richard Curlin led the football squad to the 1991 Class 4A state championship. The team was led by future LSU signee David Butler on offense and Ivan Williams on defense, a future all-conference player at Nicholls State. The Gators held on for a 14-12 victory over Crowley High School in the Superdome on December 14, 1991. The parish came out in full force for the contest in the Dome, as attendance records were set that night for the most viewers ever to witness a high school event in the state of Louisiana. Just recently, the South Terrebonne baseball program, with head coach and alum of STHS, Mike Barba at the helm, won the 2022 LHSAA state title as the Gators defeated North Vermilion High School 7-6. This win transcended sports as Hurricane Ida devastated the campus of South Terrebonne in August of 2021, and this team had no home to practice or play for the entire season. All games were away from their campus as the student body platooned to the very northern part of the parish as they used H.L. Bourgeois High School's facility. Other Gator sports that had successful runs at state championships were the 1989 and 1991 softball teams under the leadership of Val Cooper. Both teams fell just short in the state championship game on the 4A level. And Chip Didier coached the Lady Gators volleyball squad to the 1984 state 4A championship contest, with the Gators falling in that contest. There were many South Terrebonne athletes who went on to have successful professional careers, mostly on the gridiron. Johnson, who went on to play college football with Colorado University and later with the Kansas City Chiefs, died tragically in 1980 during what was considered to be a routine surgery while with the franchise. Thomas Skippy Ezel was a standout quarterback for the Gators from 1974 to 1977. Ezel was the first ninth grade athlete allowed to play up to the varsity level in our public school system. This after he was a national finalist as a 13-year-old in the traditional NFL punt, pass, and kick competition. He actually attended Oaklawn Junior High as a ninth grade student athlete, but played football at South Terrebonne High School. Jay Penison, a 1979 Gator graduate, went on to have a very successful stint with the Houston Oilers of the NFL, playing on arguably the best offensive line ever in the NFL as a center with the likes of Hall of Famer Bruce Matthews, Dean Steinkuhler, Mike Munchak, and Kent Hill. Clarence Verdun, a 1980 graduate of South Terrebonne, is probably the most decorated athlete to come out of the Berg School on the professional level, as he won a Super Bowl ring with the Washington Redskins in 1988 and was a member of the NFL All-Pro team as a kick returner in both 1992 and 1993. Melvin Johnson's brother, Troy, had a 6-year run as a wide receiver in the USFL, the NFL, and the Canadian Football League.
Coach Marcello was just brilliant. He could look at you and make adjustments, so I moved to wide receiver. In our JV year, I led the team in receptions, and Clarence Verdun led the team in rushing.
And Philip Livas, a 2007 graduate of South Terrebonne High School, went on to star at Louisiana Tech, where he was the MVP of the 2010 Independence Bowl, and later spent time with both the Miami Dolphins and the Baltimore Ravens in the NFL. Livas was recently named as one of the top 50 football players to ever play at Louisiana Tech. With the northern part of Terrebonne Parish booming in the early 70s, H.L. Bourgeois High School was established in Gray to serve the communities of Schriever, Gibson, Gray, and Upper Bayou Black, along with portions of the northern part of Houma. Brought in to start the athletic program for the Braves was Don Schwab, a native of Labadyville and a former LSU great. H.L. Bourgeois also started its tenure at the highest level of LHS AA competition, being classified as a 4A school at the outset, and is still the largest school population-wise in the parish. Early football teams at HLB had success at the district level, but it wasn't until the strong season in 1987 by the volleyball program under head coach Chip Didier, who moved north to the school from South Terrebonne, that the athletic program at HLB achieved. Didier also led the 1989 Lady Braves to another state title, followed up by a 1992 state runner-up title. As a matter of fact, girls programs at the reservation have the only state championships to date for the school, as Gerald Albert, who also migrated from the north to Gray from Vanderbilt Catholic in 1988, led the Lady Brave softball program to a 1992 state 4A championship, ironically over South Terrebonne in a game that was played in Alexandria. The Lady Braves rode the arm and bat of All-State pitcher, Class 4A MVP Joni Dusenberry in that special season, as the girls broke through with a championship after finishing as state runners-up in both 1990 and 1991.
Paul Fournier, when I left Vanderbilt, I really appreciate he and Luther Fletcher's efforts to allow me to coach in the public schools at H.L. Bourgeois. But again, like I said before, I was lucky again, because when I got there, here comes this influx of really, really good athletes that we were able to develop the program there.
The highlight for the boys' programs at H.L. Bourgeois was a 2008 5A state runner-up title for the Braves basketball team. Under the guidance of head coach Andrew Kywet, HLB fell to a very dominant Lafayette High squad in the Cajun Dome, which is on the campus of the University of Louisiana. This has been the only finals appearance for any of the boys' programs on the reservation to date, but it does not overshadow some of the individual talent that went on to have professional careers in their respective sports. Two of H.L. Bourgeois' biggest athletic stars actually followed the same path to the professional level. Both 1979 alum Jesse Miles and 1983 alum Mitch Andrews went on to excel in football at LSU, then moved on to play with the Denver Broncos in the National Football League. Miles, a running back, was an all-state performer in both football and track and field while in Gray. Andrews was a tight end, and he caught 53 passes in his career as an LSU Tiger. As part of the Living Word Ministry, Houma Christian School was established in 1984 on Val High Boulevard in Houma as an alternative to the public schools and the Houma-Thibodaux Diocese. The school participated in the Louisiana Christian School Athletic Association for over 25 years before becoming a member of the LHSAA in the early second decade of this century. Although very early in its infant stage of playing in the high school association as a 2A school, the Lady Warriors basketball team did make 2 consecutive state final games, falling in the Division IV bracket to powerhouse Lafayette Christian in both 2017 and 2018. To alleviate the population increase in the southern part of the parish, Eleanor Memorial Junior High was upgraded to high school status in 1988. It served the East Houma area along with the Dulac community. The school became immediately known for its stellar boys and girls basketball play. With Ernest Brown starting the basketball program from its infancy, Patriots basketball program made deep runs in the Class A playoffs throughout the 90s, with the 1997 team falling in the state championship game to Cohen by 1 point, 59-58. The team captured the state title in 1998 under the direction of head coach Sterling Washington in a thrilling win over Woodlawn of Baton Rouge in overtime, 63-58. Patriots made it back to the title game in 2007 under head coach Scott Gotro, this time falling short in an overtime decision to Westgate High School out of New Iberia. The Lady Patriots basketball program has achieved dynasty status over the past 30 years, as the school hired legendary coach Kenneth Dixon to lead the girls program in 1992. The girls have accumulated 6 state titles, 5 with Dixon at the helm, and 1 this past year with Javine Robinson after the tragic death of Coach Dixon during the playoffs of 2021. The title years for the Patriots were 1999, 2000, 03, 07, 17, and 2022, with runner-up titles coming in 2001 and 2008. The lone athlete from Eleanor Memorial to achieve professional status from the school is 2017 alum football athlete Dontavian Morton. Better known as Tay, he went on to have an all-Big 12 career at Oklahoma State University as a wide receiver for the Cowboys and is presently an NFL free agent with the San Francisco 49ers. Our parish's latest school to compete in the Louisiana High School Athletic Association is Covenant Christian Academy, located in the northern part of the parish near Highway 90. Part of the First Baptist Ministry, the school was established in 2007 with the early athletic teams participating in the Louisiana Christian School Athletic Association, where they had much success. In 2012, the school made the move to LHSAA, where the school was initially successful at the 1A level in football with multiple district championships, and, as of late, in baseball, where the program has 6 consecutive district titles. The school is still in search of its first team state title. The success of the athletic programs in the Terrebonne Parish high schools only accelerated with the development of recreation outlets for the citizens of our community over the years. First, in the spring of 1937, a movement for organized recreation for the parish was started by the Homer Rotary Club. During the fall of that same year, the principal civic and fraternal bodies of Terrebonne Parish were organized to make recommendations to the parish police jury. The parish school board also was involved, and the city council as well here in Houma, with each being appropriated a sum of $700 to be expended in the promotion of recreational activities in the ensuing year. This was the start of the Terrebonne Parish Recreation Council, known today as Terrebonne Parish Recreation. The mission was dedicated to serve the recreational needs of all of the residents of the parish, regardless of their age or status in life. In the early stages of TPR, organized leagues were set up for the youth in baseball, softball, basketball, and volleyball. On a community level, there were community fun days, family fun nights, fishing rodeos, talent nights, car tournaments, ping pong tournaments, and more. Santa Claus and Easter Bunny were brought in on respective holidays, and the moniker, "The family that plays together stays together," was instituted. The first superintendent of the recreation was Stephen Kenny, a man who had served for a number of years in the Terrebonne area as the field representative for the Boy Scouts of America. Kenny assumed the post of superintendent on November 1st, 1944, and continued in this capacity for 27 years. During those 27 years, the name Steve Kenny and recreation became synonymous in the Terrebonne Parish area. Along with other programs, Terrebonne Parish Recreation instituted the sport of men's and women's slow pitch leagues in softball. That was in the 1960s, satisfying the need for recreation to the adult community, teams being sponsored by various businesses, many that were oil field related. Although not all weekend tournaments were hosted by the Recreation League, most were played at recreation fields dotted across the parish and were a financial means for teams to pay incurring expenses. An adult softball complex was completed in East Houma on the old Naval Air Base property that still stands today as a central location for softball play. In 1973, the sport of Bantam League tackle football was included for boys ages 9 to 13, and seldom used Southdown Football Stadium was used as the hub for league play. In the early 80s, a girls' fast-pitch softball league was initiated as the sport became popular at the high school level. With travel league sports becoming popular in the last 10 years and some growing pains throughout the decades, TPR is still a viable asset to the parish for fitness, health, and competitive competition in a multitude of sports and activities. Initiated by the City Council of Houma, the Houma Athletic Recreation Council was established in the 50s to facilitate and maintain youth recreation leagues in football, basketball, and baseball within the city limits of Houma. These youth leagues were governed by a director of athletics, the first of which was Terrebonne High School football coach Buck Sieber. later to be headed by Buddy Marcello, who had started successful programs at both St. Francis and South Terrebonne High School. Park reached its heights in competition and participation in the late 60s and early 70s, and was dissolved in the late 70s as recreation was consolidated parish-wide with Terrebonne Parish Recreation. Both TPR and Hart did not field soccer leagues. With soccer gaining popularity in the United States, the Houma Terrebonne Soccer Association began play in 1979 with the goal of offering the sport of soccer to boys and girls. Toddlers all the way up to young adults also compete both on the recreation level and on the competitive play level. Initially known as the Bayou Soccer Association, first playing fields were located near Ellender Junior High and Annunciata Catholic Church on the east side of Houma. In 1984, the Terrebonne Chargers 12U team became the first team in Houma to win a state championship. The 2022 HTSA Blackhawk 19U team has the highest national finish in association history as they made it to the USYS National President's Cup in Greensboro, North Carolina in July, finishing fourth in the country. Presently, operating at the Bayou Country Sports Complex on Highway 311 in Houma, the HTSA is no doubt instrumental in the rise of soccer play in the parish, as Vanderbilt Catholic holds multiple titles in both girls and boys play. South Terrebonne has a state runner-up title, and all of our schools are now very competitive in the sport. With its start being a leisure measure to satisfy the athletic competitor, bowling became a sport that has grown to new heights in our area, with bowlers from our Bayou region reaching national success and our high school instituting the sport as one of their athletic programs. Bowling started as a family affair, with only a few lanes available at the first lanes in Terrebonne Parish in the VFW building located on Barrow Street in the 1950s. The success of the lanes on Barrow Street led to the erection of Houma Bowl, located on Main Street just north of the Houma city limits in the 1960s. With substantially more lanes, Houma Bowl afforded league play along with a site for those who were advanced to take bowling to the next level. Jim Crowley, who came to Terrebonne Parish as a member of the Navy station on the Naval Air Base on the east side of Houma, remained and became an integral part of advancing the sport. He managed and later owned Houma Bowl until its demise in the early 80s. In 1975, the east side of Houma had Bowl South open, located at the corner of Tunnel Boulevard and Grand Caillou Road. Bowl South catered to bowling leagues of all ages and was one of the first outlets for high school bowlers in our area. Unfortunately, the 12-lane outlet was devastated by Hurricane Ida in August of 2021 and is no longer operable. The latest and only active bowling alley in Terrebonne Parish is Creole Lanes, located on Tunnel Boulevard near South Down Elementary. Established in 1983, Creole Lanes was the first to have synthetic lanes and an automatic scoring system. Jim Crowley acquired the facility in 1993 with Perry Segura after the facility ran into financial trouble, and in 1998 became sole owner and immediately upgraded the facility with glow-in-the-dark carpet and automatic children bumpers. Creole Lanes now is the primary host of bowling matches for all of Terrebonne Parish schools. The most decorated bowler to come out of Terrebonne Parish is Avery LeBlanc. LeBlanc grew up in Bayou Cane and is a 1962 graduate of Terrebonne High. He became a member of the Professional Bowlers Association and has qualified for the television finals of 12 PBA events. Being part of the sportsman's paradise, Terrebonne Parish has certainly been a hunter's wonderland. Not many people know that we have one of the finest educational marksman programs in the country here in Terrebonne, which encourages the young hunter both in skill and safety.
YHEC stands for Youth Hunter Education Challenge, and this program started way back by the NRA, and they wanted to have a program to get kids in the outdoors, kids with gun safety and that kind of stuff. And Terrebonne Parish picked it up right away in 1986. There's two categories. There's a junior and a senior event. Junior is from 10 years old to 14 years old, then 15 to 18. And North Louisiana just kicked everybody's butt the whole time. They won everything. And we would go to the competitions and we would hope to win maybe a third place in one of the categories. And then we practiced really hard, and the kids all got their friends and everything. This is South Louisiana, sportsman's paradise, right, in Terrebonne Parish. So we had the duck hunters in the area and stuff, so they came on. We got some kids and we got some great parents all through this. and we finally put our first team together in 2006, and we won a state championship, and that was pretty big. And in 2007, that was a senior one. In 2007, we won a junior, and then from then on, we've pretty well been winning everything since then. So they know who we are. 2014, we had a super team. I mean, we've had great teams all the way through and a bunch of state champions, individual state champions. But in 2014, Doyle Donaldson was a senior and William Powell was a junior. And we went to the national competition. I think that was in Pennsylvania that year. And not only did we win the team award, but these two boys actually won the individual national award.
With our climate, recreational swimming has always been popular in our area. Natural access was readily available with our waterways, and public pools in various parish communities became a reality, starting with the American Legion pool built by the WPA in 1934. It wasn't until the early 70s that competitive swimming found its way into the area, with summer programs being offered at the Bayou Bend Pool in Lisa Park and Ellendale Country Club. Throughout the end of the 20th century, competitive swim teams popped up throughout the parish, most participating in the South Central Swim Association. Teams such as the Bayou Barracudas and Orca from Houma, the Tarpons of Bayou Blue, Bayou Stingrays of Chauvin have led to all of our high schools in the parish now having competitive swim teams in the LHSAA, with Vanderbilt having accumulated 7 state titles. Originally called the Houma Golf Club, Terrebonne Parish got its first golf course in 1923. The 9-hole layout was located next to the Intracoastal Canal in the southwest portion of Houma and had crude beginnings. Substantial upgrades were made to the grounds in the 50s, and the course's name was later changed by new management to Southern Oaks Golf Club. Due to financial difficulties, the course was closed in March of 2018. Designed by Joseph S. Finger, the Ellendale Golf Course opened in 1967. The 18-hole par 72 course measures 7,120 yards of golf from the black tees. Putting greens are Miniverde Ultra Dwarf Bermuda. Ellendale Country Club has hosted numerous professional and amateur championships and qualifiers, including the APT Golf Pro Tour Series, the Women's APT Golf Tour Series, and the Ellendale Intercollegiate, which is hosted by Nicholls State. The course record of 63 is held by Bubba Watson in the 2005 Adams Golf Tour, hosted by Mary Bird Perkins Cancer Center at then called Terrebonne General Medical Center. In 1982, Houma got its third golf course as Colonial Acres, a 9-hole course, was designed, built, and owned by John Cooper. With only Vanderbilt Catholic competing in golf before 1990, the course, located on Alma Street in the Lisa Park area of Houma, became ambassadors for all of the public schools as programs were begun at all high schools in Terrebonne Parish. Cooper allowed the high schools use of the course at no charge. Ironically, Colonial Acres is now known as the Houma Golf Club, as new management changed the name. Terrebonne Parish now has 2 fully operational courses, the 18-hole layout at Ellendale Country Club, the 9-hole facility at the Houma Golf Club, along with a practice 9-hole par 3, and that's at the recreation facility in Donner. Along with the rest of the state, boxing achieved golden era status in our parish in the early part of the 20th century, especially on the amateur stage, with access to many gyms. The most decorated of those boxers was Sewally Whitney, a 1934 graduate of Terrebonne High School who was in line to compete in the 1940 Olympics, which were canceled due to World War II. Whitney, known as the Terrebonne Terror, was a member of Loyola's boxing team from 1936 to 1940. He made history at the school, becoming the only student to ever win 2 NCAA championships. He was also a 3-time SAAU and Sugar Bowl champion. Through the remainder of the 19th century, Terrebonne Parish hosted local and regional boxing cards, primarily at the East Park Recreation Center. And now, in 2022, the parish has its most decorated professional boxer, Jonathan Guidry of Dulac. Jonathan won the North American Boxing Federation heavyweight title in June when knocking out title holder Dacquary Scott in the 6th round of the title bout in Miami. Guidry was 18-1-2 at the time of the fight with 16 knockouts, and his only defeat was in a world boxing title fight, losing in a controversial split decision in Warren, Ohio in January. A side note related to boxing, maybe the greatest boxer of all time, Muhammad Ali, visited Terrebonne Parish in 1975 with an impromptu drop-in at H.L. Bourgeois High School. Ali, traveling from New Orleans to Houston, knew of a faculty member at the school and came in to visit and speak to the student body for about 90 minutes. That was when the boxer was at the apex of his career. Tennis has been a competitive pastime in Terrebonne Parish starting in the mid-20th century and continuing today.
There was 4 courts in Homer. Along with the Shady Oak Park, you had the 2 courts by the bowling alley, in the back of the bowling alley, and you had 1 on Wright Street, and you had 2 at Dumas Auditorium, all of which had lights. So it's my belief that our forefathers really prepared for tennis in Homer long before I started playing, because these courts were all there in 1950. The 2 courts at the air base were blacktop. All the rest of them was concrete. Now, right now, the Roussel courts are unplayable. They've just deteriorated to nothing. The Shady Oak Park is now being a parking lot for the coroner's office, and the only one that survived was the Wright Street Park, and it's still there and it's still usable. There's just don't have any lights right now. Now, back in those days, you had to have a press because the rackets were made out of wood, and with the humidity down here, if you didn't have a press, your racket would start warping. The Air Force Radar Station organization did a big tennis tournament for the city. One weekend we had the junior division, the next weekend we had the senior division. And we played it mostly on the air base court. So that was in '56, they were quite usable. In fact, the first weekend I won the junior division championship. So the next weekend I asked, could I play with the men's division? And they agreed. So I ended up playing against Reggie Cox for the men's championship for the city of Homer in the spring of 1956. And I beat him in the 3rd set. So I won the junior and the men's division in 1956.
With a rich history of sporting success in our area, maybe the sport with the most national relevance in Terrebonne Parish is drag racing. With natives of the parish like world-renowned Leonard Hughes of Candies and Hughes, world champion driver Sammy Pizzolata, the Teuton family, Jerry Dover, Bobo Geist, Jerry Caro, and so many more, Homer was a hotbed for drivers, mechanics, tuners, and owners. NHRA racing started at its earliest with local racing at airport strips, and Homer was no different. The early days of racing occurred on Blimp Road on the old Naval Air Base located near the Homer Airport. From those humble beginnings, racing enthusiasts went on to thrive nationally.
They were all at airports, and we raced there, raced at the Hammond Airport, Esтерwood, Louisiana Airport, Lake Charles, and then Homer, was a little later. It came along just a few months later.
Leonard Hughes is known as the godfather of racing from the area. Born in Gray, but living most of his life in the Broadmoor area of Homer, Hughes' early dominance came regionally in winning virtually every race in his '57 Chevy, which later led to a partnership with Paul Candies.
When that '57 Chevrolet, that wasn't a regular '57. They only made 10 of those cars. They made it for NASCAR. It was a no back seat. And it had a roll cage pads in the bottom, if whatever sport you want to do with it. And it was a drag race car too. And that's what started me off. I almost won every week with that '57 Chevrolet.
Hughes' experience with racing ran the full gamut of driver, mechanic, tuner, and owner. Both Candies and Hughes are in the NHRA Hall of Fame. Hughes won 45 major events between 1970 and 1994, including 28 NHRA titles in funny car and top fuel divisions. Other notable sons of Terrebonne Parish to succeed at the national level were Sammy Pizzolata, who was the 1988 NHRA Stock Eliminator World Champion and always at the top of the leaderboards on the circuit during that era. and Jeff Touton, who is in the NHRA South Central Division IV Hall of Fame, holding multiple NJRA, ET, and MPR records with a variety of cars.
You had a regional director for NHRA, and they had this old Chevrolet sedan delivery. It had a little rack on the top, and they put boards up there and the timing equipment. And they actually had, we started with a flagman who put the flag on a button. And when he lifted it, the lights turned green. And there wasn't any red light or nothing like that, but back then when you lifted it, if somebody left that early, they stopped it.
Touton was the first to win class at U.S. Nationals in a drag pack Dodge. He also was a winner in stock eliminator at the U.S. Nationals in 2011 and still holds the title of oldest driver to win in stock eliminator. Jeff has sponsored dozens of cars and drivers throughout the years with World Championship results. So many more drivers and mechanics from our parish can be added to this list of those having success both regionally and nationally. Adding to the appeal of racing in our area was the creation of a drag strip in Terrebonne Parish. Located on West Park Avenue, near present-day H.L. Bourgeois High School just north of Houma, Southland Dragway opened on July 1st, 1969. It was built on land which was previously a golf driving range, and the track office was the former pro shop. Luke Grisaffi agreed to fund the track, which was modeled after Orange County, California Raceway, with covered grandstands, an octagonal-shaped tower, and a scoreboard to display the ET and MPH on each run. Racing greats of the time like Gene Snow, Don Prudhomme, Tom McEwen, and our own Candies and Hughes came in to race at the facility. It operated on the second and fourth Sundays of the month and featured class racing along with Top Fuel and Funny Car shows, Division IV WCS points meets, and even a soapbox derby. After changing ownership a few times throughout the next decade, a group of Houma racers, headed by Joe Touton, revived the track later in the 1970s, installing lights for night racing and operated it for one rain-filled season. 10 years after opening, the drag strip was closed. Ironically, with the sport of baseball not being in the high schools as a competitive sports program until 1951 at St. Francis, baseball was the sport to have the first professional franchise in Terrebonne Parish over 10 years prior. The 1940 Houma Buccaneers became the first minor league baseball team based in Houma, but the team didn't make it the entire season in the Bayou region. The Houma Buccaneers began play as members of the Class D level Evangeline League. On June 27, 1940, the Houma Buccaneers had a 23-43 record when the franchise moved to Natchez, Mississippi, finishing the season as the Natchez Pilgrims. Minor league baseball returned to Houma in 1946. After stopping play during World War II, the Evangeline League reformed for the 1946 season. Originally, a league franchise was awarded to Opelousas, Louisiana, but the potential franchise there was ultimately unable to meet financial needs, and the franchise folded. A month before the 1946 season, a group in Houma led by Gibson Otan met financial needs by organizing a corporation, selling stock to the public, and securing the American Legion field on Williams Boulevard. Houma was granted a franchise, and Tom Smith was appointed as the business manager. The 1946 team used the actual uniforms intended for Opelousas. The team moniker of Indians worked for Houma. Again, playing in Class D, the 1946 Indians won the league championship. They ended the season with a record of 92-36, finishing 6 full games ahead of second-place Natchez. The team was led by player-manager Joseph Benning and player-manager Paul Fugit, with Fugit hitting .327 with 23 home runs and 130 RBIs. Leading the team and entire Evangeline League in hitting that season was Indian outfielder Mike Conroy, who hit for a .372 average. Leonard Picu led the league with 53 stolen bases, and Bill Thomas had an outstanding pitching record of 35 wins and 7 losses. After the 1946 championship season, allegations surfaced that Houma and Abbeville players had conspired with gamblers over the outcomes of 3 playoff games. At the October 23, 1946 league meeting, it was alleged that the Houma players conspired with gamblers to lose the 4th game of the first round of the recent playoffs, lose the first game of the second round, and win the 4th game of the second round. After the allegations, Judge W.G. Bremen, president of the National Association of Professional Baseball Leagues, summoned the unnamed accused players to attend a hearing on January 10th to 11th, 1947. After interviews and further investigation, 5 players were put on the ineligible list, meaning they could not play in minor league baseball. Homa players Bill Thomas, Leonard Piku, Alvin Kaiser, and Paul Fugit, along with Don Vetterell of Abbeville, were placed on the ineligible list by Brenham for their actions. Later, Thomas and Piku appealed and were ultimately restored immediately for the Homa team. After his reinstatement, Thomas would continue his career to set the all-time minor league career records for total games, victories, losses, hits, and runs. His career record was 383 wins, 264 losses over 24 seasons. Continuing play in 1947, the Homa Indians placed 5th in the Evangeline League final standing. The 1948 Homa Indians again captured the Evangeline League pennant and overall championship after the entire playoffs were canceled due to weather, making Homa the default champion. Homa ended the regular season with an 81-55 record under manager George Washburn, finishing 2.5 games ahead of the second-place Hammond Berries. The Homa 1948 playoff series against Baton Rouge's Red Sticks was tied 1-1, and the Hammond Berries and Thibodeau Giants were tied 2-2 when the entire 1948 playoffs were canceled due to bad weather. Homa's Roy Tex Sanner had a noteworthy season as a hitter and a pitcher. Sanner won the Evangeline League's Triple Crown with 34 home runs, 126 RBIs, and a batting average of .386. As a pitcher, Sanner had a 21-2 record, .258 ERA with 251 strikeouts. Homa's season home attendance was 96,744, an average of 1,423 at each contest. Homa Indians and manager George Washburn won their second consecutive pennant in 1949. After capturing the Evangeline League pennant with an 81-58 record, the Indians were defeated by the Alexandria Aces 4-1 in the first round of the playoffs. In 1950, the Evangeline League was upgraded to a C League, with the Indians finishing with a 53-84 record and had the first 3 consecutive 7th-place finishes through 1952. Average attendance declined each year, with attendance being 632 per game in 1950, 474 in 1951, and 377 in 1952. The Indians were folded in 1952. Homa was without a minor league team until 2003, when the Homa Hawks, owned by Gus Brown Jr., became an expansion member of the Southeastern League of Professional Baseball. The team initially played their home games in Homa at Southland Field on Prevost Drive. In May 2003, the name of the mascot was released following an internet poll to determine the name. Parrain, the Hawk, received 52% of the votes. The team would open the 2003 season at home against the Pensacola Pelicans behind a crowd of over 1,200 and defeated the defending league champs by a score of 11-5 behind pitching ace Stephen Locklear. After discrepancies in paperwork related to field usage, the Hawks would play home games at the visitors' ballpark and only played 3 games in Terrebonne Parish. After a respectable 1-loss record for the season, the Hawks disbanded after the 2003 season, claiming breach of contract with the local recreation district. And we don't want to forget one very strong baseball squad that competed as amateurs in our area. In the late 60s and early 70s, Homa fielded a team called, again, the Homa Indians, who participated in the Southern Advanced Amateur Baseball League. Comprised of many ex-Nicholls State University players, the team, sponsored by the Homa Civitan Club, played its home games on the Vanderbilt Catholic Diamond. The team flirted with league pennant titles until disbanding in 1971. Established in 1980, Homa was host to a semi-pro baseball league franchise called the Homa Oilers. The team was sponsored by Budweiser, and many came to know the team as the Budweiser Eagles. Led by manager Gray Folse, the Oilers competed in the South Independent Semi-Pro League with other teams from New Orleans, Baton Rouge, Lafayette, Lake Charles, and the Mississippi Gulf Coast area. The team, comprised of ex-collegiate players mostly from the Bayou region, was one of the more successful teams in the league until it disbanded after the 1984 season. The Oilers played their home games at Vanderbilt Catholic Field, now known as Harold Haydell Park, on the campus of the school. First taste of professional football in Homa was of the indoor fashion, as the Homa Bayou Bucks were awarded a franchise on December 19th of 2001. The team, owned by Pseudo Properties Incorporated, competed at the National Indoor Football League level from 2002 through 2004, playing their home games at the Homa Terrebonne Civic Center. Pseudo Properties assigned Travis Carell as the general manager of the franchise, and he in turn named Jack Phillips Jr. as the team's head coach. The NIFL was comprised of teams primarily from the Mid-South Oil Belt to the Southern Atlantic area. Most players competing for the Bayou Bucks were from a 200-mile radius of the Houma area, and most had some type of collegiate competition background. After a 5-win, 9-loss first season in 2002, the team found moderate success in making the NIFL playoffs with 10 wins in 2003 and 11 wins in 2004. Unfortunately, the Bucks lost in the first round of the playoffs in both of those seasons. After the 2004 NIFL season, the team folded following internal problems. Based in Texas and Louisiana, the Southern Indoor Football League was Houma's second attempt at a football franchise. Established in 2009, the SIFL had teams from Houma, Lafayette, Lake Charles, Beaumont, and Austin, actually competing after the league initially stated there would be teams from the Houston area involved. Under the ownership of Franklin Thomas, the team from Houma played its home games in the Houma Terrebonne Civic Center. The Conquerors struggled in the league with only 3 wins and 8 losses. In addition, the Conquerors became property of the league mid-season due to differences between the team ownership and the SIFL. With 4 of the 5 teams in the league making the playoffs, the number 4 seed Houma squad was soundly defeated by the top-seeded team from Lake Charles in the first round. Due to internal problems with both the league and the Conquerors management, 2009 was the lone season for the franchise. And we'd be remiss to leave out fishing as a haven for anglers, both freshwater and salt. Competitive fishing tournaments and rodeos did not happen in Terrebonne Parish until the mid-19th century and now revolve around numerous organizations using the format for fundraising. There is hardly a weekend from March until August where you can't find a fishing tournament somewhere in our area. And we even have anglers who have held state and national records throughout the years, and one that still remains.
Me and David Prevost had a chance to make a little fishing trip one day, and we ran out of Grand Isle. It was just me and him in the boat, right to Grand Bayou. It's just 7 to 10 miles out of the pass, and we were in tarpon. Us and some other boats were in tarpon. We actually caught 8 that day. I caught 4 and he caught 4, but his last tarpon was a monster, and the state record was 230 pounds. And we didn't know it was that big until we got it to the side of the boat. But once we had it to the side of the boat, we both looked at it and said, this is it. You know, this is the state record. Not knowing any better, we gaffed it, pulled it in the boat, and we ran to the weigh scale. We called the Wildlife and Fisheries. We got everybody there to verify the fish, and it actually was the United States record fish. So 246 and some change. I think it was like a 240 before that. And so David Prevost caught the United States and the Louisiana state record. And we're both from Terrebonne Parish, and we're right there in Grand Isle, right out the pass. So it was a great day that day.
In closing, our love of competition on the fields and the courts, in the water and on the water, and in our little piece of sportsman's paradise will always be a vital part of life. From those baseball games back in the late 19th century to the flourish of success in our programs, schools, and individuals, we truly do live in a sportsman's paradise.